You're listening to Exchange by Evolution, a melting pot of ideas and inspiration shared by some of the most successful technical leaders in the APAC region. I am Danielle, Senior Consultant of Evolution Recruitment Solution, and I help connect business with tech talent. And today, I am your host. So welcome to another episode of the Evolution Exchange. Today, we'll be discussing the topic of creating a culture of product excellence. I'm delighted to be joined by three senior thought leaders within this space. So we have Naveenkumar, Director of Product from Syfe, Vita, CPO of Money Smart, and Karthik Rajeswaran, Head of Product of Janio Asia. Hi everyone. So before we start, quick disclaimer, the thoughts and opinions shared within this podcast only represent the opinion and perspective of each individual and not the representative of the whole company. So just a quick heads up. So with that out of the way, let's start by a quick introduction. So maybe we can start from the right of the room. Maybe we can start with Max.
Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Max. I'm originally Italian. I'm Chief Product Officer for Money Smart Group. Been in Singapore for 4.5 years. Money Smart Group is pretty famous here for the blog, and we have a pretty successful aggregation website for personal finance. So if you want to search for insurance products or credit cards, I think that's probably the best place to go. And we recently, just a shameful plug, I'm just going to plug it in, but we recently launched Bubblegum, which is a digital insurance app and web where you can buy travel insurance, car insurance, term life, and many others very soon. So it's a very interesting angle to personal insurance. If you're interested and you want to buy something, please visit. I think you will love it.
All right, thanks for that. Naveen, moving on to you.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm Naveen. Where to start? Over 15 years of experience working in product space, predominantly product management. Worked with various companies of various sizes, from e-commerce to education, predominantly around fintech, right? Currently, I'm a director of product with Syfe. Syfe is an investment platform that empowers users to build their wealth, right? And we are a Singapore headquartered company operating Hong Kong and Australia, right? Glad to be part of this discussion.
Yeah, great to have you. And Karthik, glad to have you back.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be back, everyone. My name is Karthik. Currently the head of product at Janio. I have been all around the world. Currently have been in Singapore for the past year and a half. Leading product at Janio, as I mentioned, which is a fourth-party logistics company. In a nutshell, what we do is act as the platform that connects multiple different logistics service providers across all of Asia and provide services to e-commerce businesses, right? So anyone that needs to ship any product from one country in Asia to another simply integrates with our platform and simply has to let us know where it needs to start from and where it needs to end up. And we connect many different service providers. So a truck in one country, an airline, and a motorbike driver delivering it to your house all through our platform, and makes life easy for e-commerce shippers.
Yeah. Great to have you guys all on this episode. It's going to be a super interesting one. So like I said, in this episode, we'll be talking about creating a culture of product excellence. And in today's market, of course, where technology is advancing at a rapid pace, having a strong product management culture has become essential for companies to stay competitive. So in this podcast, we'll discuss what it means to have a culture of product excellence, how companies can build one, and of course, how to track the measure of its effectiveness. So let's start off with the first question. So the first question is, what does it mean to have a culture of product excellence? So anyone want to start?
I'll leave it to the gentleman with more experience and years on the table to go first.
Maybe I'll get it cracking and would love to hear from others as well, right? To me, like a product culture and culture of excellence, right, has something I define like this, right? When autonomous team who are highly engaged continuously discovers and obsesses with customer problems, right? And they solve meaningful customer problems, right? And the byproduct is value for our customers and value for the business, right? And this is the entire process, right? When it's done well at a company level and not only at a product team level, right? That to me is a product culture, right?
Yeah, absolutely spot on. I think, reflecting, what is product culture and what is culture in general, right? Because I think there's a lot of people talking about it and asking and trying to understand. The problem with this is that it's hard to define, right? Product culture as a company culture, it's fundamentally the sum of all the actions that people do in the organization day to day, and all the decisions they take, all the things that they do together, right? That's what defines the culture. And what Naveen just said are some of the important pillars that actually drive good decision taking, and teams that are then effective and able to work together to produce something that has a lot of value, right? Being user-centric, being data-driven, being understanding exactly what is the value that is being created, and the processes that are being aligned. You know, making sure that large teams work together efficiently is a very difficult thing, right? If you're an individual contributor, it's, you know, you can probably, and you're very good, you're very skillful, you can go and do things, very effectively. But having a larger organization working together efficiently is extremely complicated. You need to have these larger pillars that are then defined into a product culture that help them to decide and to work together very closely. I think this is an important thing, but it's not easy to define. It's not easy to transfer and to make sure, because it's not something you can look at. You have to do it every day, right? So it's a very important, very difficult thing.
And this is why I let them go first. They said pretty much everything I would have. No, I think spot on from both of them. And the hard part is that it's very difficult to define, but I think the pillars as mentioned are real customer value and focus. Then of course, business value and outcomes that are delivered, right? I think maybe one additional point I'll mention is that the form of excellence will vary depending on the value proposition of your business and the key drivers of how you deliver your value. So I think maybe a lot of modern product management, meaning like the last 5 to 10 years, the assumption is that it's just digital products only. And I think that's easier to wrap your head around. However, a lot of companies are still driven by technology and products and may not seem like they're traditional pure software or digital product companies. So being in logistics, selling financial service products, selling investment or offering investment products, right? Fundamentally, you have to bring many different teams and departments together. And I think that's what product excellence and overall company excellence is. Mm-hmm. And I think the really strongest or best product managers or product leaders are people who learn how to piece everything together, bring multiple teams and people together, fundamentally to understand what is it as a company that we are delivering to customers, how do we get that done, irrespective of what that is.
Okay, understand. So you guys think it's really hard to define, but there has to be, I guess, some elements of a strong product management culture. I mean, do you guys, have a top 3, or what is your top element you think?
Yeah, that's very true, right? There are a couple of common elements that you can figure out in this quest for this culture or excellence, right? Teams to have common shared understanding of how they want to operate, right? Predominantly good product teams or good teams knows what the common operating principle is, right? They do questions a lot of assumption. They begin with the knowledge that we start with a lot of assumptions, right? So common operating principles should be very clear, right, within the team. That could be one. The other one is the clarity of what are we trying to solve, right? And why are we trying to solve, right? So most of these teams are mission driven, right? And they cut across product managers, designers, business, engineering, so on and so forth, right? I feel these 2 segments, right, are very critical. And the third one is predominantly around how do you create that continuous feedback loop in a safe space, right? How do you say that, hey, this is not working, and anyone in the team can say that, hey, this is not working, there's a better way, right? To me, these 3 components are part of key visible areas if the culture is turning towards that excellence.
Okay. And do you guys agree?
Yeah, very much. I think, again, I'll add on to that, and I think that'll be a common theme, right? Because whatever each one says, I'm sure we'll be thinking, that's
unless someone throws something.
Sure, yes, and maybe we'll get to that, right? In terms of, I guess, what a healthy or good product culture looks like, or maybe an excellence, if you will. I'll start from my view of what I think a good individual product manager should have or should think like in the first place. Is the 3 buckets I view are: one, always know how to think like a customer, know how to think like a business owner, or your CEO, so understand what is on top of their mind, and then know how to think like an investor, right? Both you investing your own money and resources, your team's money and resources or energy, and also literally from the investors that have put money into your business. Why have they chosen to do so? Because at the end of the day, assuming you are a venture-backed company, there are a different set of constraints coming into your business. So you kind of have to have these things in your mind at all times. And that then lays the foundation for, okay, cool, how do you expand that thinking from your sort of individual team to your broader product team, and then across the business as well. And if you have that mindset, you will most likely end up coming to the right outcomes and results. And I think a key point around the operating principles of asking why and understanding the reasons behind your problem is effectively just providing context as much as possible, right? The motivation for the problem at hand or the opportunity at hand, who you are going to impact, the potential impact it will have, and then you get to the solution, right? I think that's the real sort of evolution or difference from a project mindset, as they call it, to a product mindset. Yeah.
I think all of these are absolutely accurate. If I can add maybe a couple of things more, just to provide maybe a slight different, not different angle, but a kind of in addition, I think a strong kind of a data-centric view, right? So being always, more and more when you work with people in the business or even large organization, sometimes you hear phrases like "I feel," "I think," "we should," because and so because it's a natural thing, right? And when you look at a problem, you tend to put your own view onto the problem. You think that this is the only way to look at the problem, but forcing yourself to go back to the data and really understand what is happening, together with being user-centric, together with being understanding exactly where you're going in terms of the vision, but having the true understanding of where is the problem, I think is an important aspect. And if I may, another one, also kind of sort of like an owner mentality, right? Mm-hmm. So really understand like kind of that people need to. So product manager, I think one aspect is really this accountability in terms of taking responsibility for this and just making sure that things are happening, because ultimately product managers are not responsible for anything, right? I mean, they're not developers, they're not copywriter, they're not marketing people, they're not designers, but they ultimately own the customer, right? So they ultimately are responsible to deliver something that generates value for the customer. And in order to do that, you need to have an owner mentality. You need to understand exactly that this is the problem. I'm going to have the drive to be able to basically guide it through and bring it at the end. And I think this is a very important aspect, part of the culture. Yeah.
Yeah, super interesting. Yeah, so I guess what everyone has been tuning into this is, of course, how can companies build this culture? So, I mean, I would love to hear how you guys have done it for your own company or previous companies, but I mean, or what you think that you should be doing. I mean, what do you guys think?
I think this is a very hard thing to replicate, like Max said, right? But of course, we can start looking at this from a different angle, right? The angle here is, hey, as a team, we win together, right? And it's not just product team, right? I emphasize the product again, right? It's not just the product team leading and everyone following. Okay? Yeah. So it starts with how do we plan, right? The planning clarity, like most of the companies do this quarterly OKR system, right? Objective key results, right? And that's a great opportunity for companies to foster this ground up understanding of customers, understanding of problems, and giving them the guardrail, right? How you plan and give that alignment, right, would be a very good starting point to essentially foster this team's ownership, right, in terms of the problem space, in terms of deep customer understanding, so on and so forth, right? That is one angle to, I've personally experienced in many companies, right, that has effectively worked from an ownership point, from an entire team engagement point, and quick discovery of problems within that, right? So that I would see a starting point.
Definitely. I mean, just to keep commenting on this specific topic, I think Amazon strategy. Actually, there's a nice book that says basically work backwards, right? Which is an interesting way of thinking. It's like, what do you mean about working backwards? I mean, why should I do it? Because you need to have a clear vision of what you want to do, right? Because if you have clarity in terms of directions, then it's always easier to align people. And a lot of the part of the product management culture is about aligning, making sure that all these things know exactly where we're going, how we're going to do it, what are the steps. That's why planning is so important. But you also need to know where you're going. So work backwards for your final objective, and then try to understand how to get there, right? Part of the Amazon culture is what they say is like stubborn on the vision and flexible on the execution, basically, right? So let's try to define the things. Then, of course, there are going to be many different ways how you reach that point. But if everybody's crystal clear on this direction, everything else is going to be 10 times easier. And I think it's part of the communication and alignment. So, yeah.
And that's an excellent point, right? Like we used to do this same Amazon way of press releasing.
Yeah,
right?
press release.
We do a press release and then send it to our potential customers to review it and say, like, do you see a value in it, right? Similarly, you can share it to your stakeholders and say, hey, this is the press release, right? I think that's an effective way to change the angle of how we are solving problems and fostering that culture.
Yeah. I think, having been in a few different environments, I can say that I don't think there are any best practices or single best practices. There are more so principles that you can follow. Definitely one key principle is working with the end goal or the customer experience in mind, and then working backwards, right? For sure. That's, I think, intuitively something that I personally do, and is something that is translated well even in a professional context. But I think a major point to address is that so much of how you choose to operate and go about building this culture is dependent on the people at hand, and then the broader organizational culture as well. Yeah. Because I think, to Naveen's point of it is not just one division or team that succeeds, it's everybody coming together. If you do have a culture where teams are a bit more protective and throw others under the bus or are quick to point fingers and so on, and I'm sure we've all been in such environments, that becomes a lot more challenging to do so, right? So you can try to say, hey, yes, let us function well as a product or product and engineering team, but then you will have broader limitations, right? So then you have to invest a lot of your energy and time into building bridges across the board. And so it's a very different approach to take, right? Whereas if you already have that open collaboration, then your challenge is different, right? And then how do you go about addressing that? So I think that, I guess, comes through experience. There's pretty much no other way but to face certain challenges, learn from them, and then know how to adapt. And then the bigger thing is then your speed to adaptation hopefully improves as time goes by.
Do you think that's more significantly a challenge because your team is located global, like different locations?
Not necessarily. I've actually seen it work very well when people have been fully remote, and I've seen it like communication be non-existent even though everybody's in the same office, right? So it really does vary. I think, it's very difficult to sort of place a single cause at the
But do you guys think that plays a factor? I know you guys just started going back to the office, right? For Syfe, 4 days a week, and then you guys are full-time in the office.
2 days.
Do you think being remote and in the office makes a difference in terms of creating this culture?
Need not, right? Like I said, our engineers are 3,000 kilometers away from where we are operating. We are a HQ, and we have like offices in Australia and Hong Kong, right? I think the central point is, does the team have the clarity on like, hey, what are they trying to achieve now versus later versus down the line, right? And one thing that clearly works is having overlapping success metrics, right? Which brings teams together, right? Because like honestly, this is the same thing both the teams want across the geography, right? And then they more communicate towards that. The decisions are going to be around that, right? So physical location, yes, it helps if they are ad hoc problem solving, ad hoc brainstorming. You can never replace that. It's absolutely a good thing to have. But once you have that proper planning and clarity on the team on what we want to achieve, that is predominantly a bigger factor.
Yeah, you mentioned something about kind of maintaining a transparent feedback loop just now, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that was also an issue, or it's just,
Absolutely right. Like, see, at the end of the day, the system's or team's success is as good as how people feel in this process, right? It's not about the outcome finally that gets measured and everyone gets rewarded, right? The going through the process, it should be rewarding, right? For that, the team needs to contribute on their own, saying that, hey, this is what I wanted to do. This is what I feel, this is good. Like Max said, hey, this is what customers are saying, right? They need to opinionate views of customers and call this out. So in order to set that, I think as leaders, we'll have to show the vulnerability and show that, say it's a safe space. Anyone can comment on anything and change it and make it better, right? Just commenting is different, and commenting and making it and giving a solution is different, right? How do you foster that feedback loop and having that space to operate is also a very key ingredient in this part.
Yeah. Maybe one question I'll ask in this regard is that I've seen that work very well, and I've been in slightly more mature organizations, maybe Series B plus, or let's say 100, 150 people plus, where there's more room and space for that. When you're very early stage, let's say seed, Series A, sort of maybe still on the journey to product market fit, do you think that's feasible, viable, or basically amidst the chaos of, hey, we don't even know who our customers or clients are yet. We don't have these longer feedback loops, and maybe even OKR setting doesn't really make sense. Any thoughts on how you go about it?
Yeah, like you said, it's the company's journey, life cycle journey, right? If you are a series, like a seed company, I'm assuming that you might have some engineers can work outside your environment, but the constant brainstorming is what is required, right? The speed of validating the ideas is super important, right? You don't have the luxury of time of bringing the team together. By design, there'll not be many teams at that point in time. The major problem there is not the culture, it's the actual product idea validation, right? So all these things as a product culture applies when there's a growth stage, and then there's a scaling to it, right? But when the idea is at a very seed level, right, that requires a different mindset. Predominantly, the founders would be driving those discussion, right? And one or two guys would be the prime drivers on that, right? And it's absolutely okay in that way.
Yeah, I think you don't really need it because the teams are always collaborating, right? It's such a small team, and that's what happened with Bubblegum, right? For 1.5 years was just a very small team, and within a larger organization, but we created this kind of a sort of like a mini startup within their own work. And the teams were just working together all day long, right? So there's no multiple teams, there's no multiple layer organization. It's 7 people sitting in a room, 8 hours a day,
churning
out things and screaming at each other, which is great. I mean, and trying things and breaking stuff and learning every day, which is, I think it's at the core of then the culture will become later. But really, as Naveen said, I think the culture becomes important when you don't have that. Yes. When you expand, when you become big, when you don't know who's the people on the other side of the room and or on the other side of the planet. And so if you have a good culture, you assume that he's gonna work with the same mindset that you have, and that's really important because otherwise you risk of going in different directions, right? So
the reason I brought that up is again, Scott, is that stage-specific approaches are crucial, and I think unfortunately many people make the mistake of doing either or. So you over-optimize for process too early when you don't even have a product or product market fit, and then on the flip side, you have people who have grown past a certain stage and you have more people and teams coming on board, but then you haven't scaled communication, you haven't scaled culture. It's still like, hey, everybody just get in the same room and collaborate. It's like, cool, there are 40 of us. How are we going to do this, right? So you have to learn to evolve and adapt based on
that. Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And it becomes a very ineffective and expensive way to run if we don't have that structures in place, right? And that's where frustrations would easily break out, right? Saying that, hey, I'm doing this, but I'm actually supposed to do this, right? Things like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's no one method for all. It's depending on one stage, what kind of company, what kind of culture you have existing.
And that's the nature of this conversation, right? It's just, as I said, it's very difficult to define, right? There are so many variables, the people that makes the organization and the stage, the level of experience of the people. Very, very hard to say, well, this is how you do it. It really depends. Yeah.
Okay, but there has to be a way to measure the success of it, no? So how do you guys go about doing that? Everyone's smiling now.
Let alone defining, right? Let's go on to the
Let's go on to measurements.
Right? It's a very, very tricky subject to go in and define and measure that, right? But ultimately, your product success is the lag metric, right? For how customers are loving your product, right? Ultimately manifests that at the end. But I do see this is a arts and science towards approaching this, right? I'm assuming that this common culture would be at a company level, right? And it would be like clearly defined, right? In terms of how we collaborate, how we make decisions, how we move fast, things like that, right? That actually sets some early lead level indicators of how well the culture is moving along in a particular direction. One could be how engaged the team is, right? In terms of
how happy is the team?
Yeah, how engaged your team is, right? It covers a lot of things, right? If they're very clear about their day-to-day functions, they're very clear about what they're trying to achieve, right? They'll be self-motivated and engaged, right? So the engagement level of teams could be measured, quarterly or even monthly, right? To act as a compass, right? The one thing I can think of that. Right. There are a couple of other things that we observe in this autonomous team, how autonomous the teams are, how well they are, understanding genuine problems. If the solution is uniquely positioned in the market, they clearly understand the underlying problem, right? So I think these are certain indicators that I personally look at on towards, hey, is the culture moving towards that? It's a quest, right? So yeah, that's the thoughts that I have.
So, again, not too much to add to that, right? Because if you get into pure product outcome and input metrics, I think those can be easier to define and it becomes very specific to the product area that you're working on and building. But if you're sort of looking at the overall health of the team, I think one important gauge for me is the independence or autonomy over time. So initially, depending on the maturity of the individual or maybe even the group, it will be a lot more, for lack of a better term, top-down. So you will provide the input and guidance, but as time goes by and there are faster loops, our teams themselves and product managers themselves coming forward with, okay, I understand that this is the approach or hypothesis we had, but hey, we have a few alternatives or hypotheses based on X, Y, Z. Some of those can be qualitative inputs, quantitative inputs, and that ties into the happiness, engagement of the teams once they start sourcing problems, ideas, approaches. A clear thing that I say is that past the first or second time, if you don't come to me with a potential solution to a problem, I cannot engage. Go take another day or two, come back. It does not have to be your individual idea. Source it together with the team, source it from other departments, etc. That is how you develop independence and autonomy. And it's not that people don't have the capacity. It's a lot of the time they're maybe either afraid or concerned, like, I don't want to put my neck on the line. It's just like, we found this thing, hey, what do you think? The more trust you put in them, and that's, I think, a key part of the psychological safety is we have to allow and encourage people to learn from mistakes, because I know I did not learn any other way. And I'm sure almost all of us are the same in that regard. So you need people who are willing to take a chance on you. Of course, like failure has a threshold or a limit. I think everybody is always accountable to certain results, outcomes within a certain time frame. And even within that, how quickly can you make the learning loop happen? And encourage people to take chances. And again, the reality is this is also where it ties into the nature of your product and business. If you're building something software related, or even if you're in an operational business, you take the risks with the lower impact or lower negative outcome efforts or projects, right? Unless you're building software that is part of an ECG monitor or something, and hey, if you get it wrong, someone's going to die of a heart attack, then cool. Please take your time, rigorously test that, consult the experts. Sure, that's a very different issue. If we're testing the checkout funnel of an e-commerce platform, please, by all means, take some chances, experiment. Of course, there are a lot of best practices out there. There are ways to measure this, but you need to entrust and empower people as much as possible.
Yeah, if I may add like another, I think, interesting angle to, I think I agree with everything you guys said, so I'm not in disagreement, but just to add maybe an additional angle is one way to measure is kind of the ability of the team to go to market, right? Because go to market requires kind of a lot of clarity in terms of what you want to do, requires a lot of alignment. It requires good execution, prioritization, understanding. And so if a team is efficient and is able to go to market efficiently, quickly, in a positive way, I think for me it's a good indicator. It means the team is working well. They're using all these tools in an efficient way, and they're able to have a positive outcome also for the business. So definitely, to me, this one. And the other thing is also like the ability of team, especially in kind of a 0 to 1 company, so at early stage in the beginning, their ability to pivot efficiently, right? Because many times when you start a business or a company, you have some assumption, you go and trying to build things, but as you make some mistakes, you learn, maybe you need to adjust. And how do you do it? And how efficiently you do it is actually usually is a good indicator. So if you do it all the time, that's not a good thing, right? If you keep pivoting, it's not a good indicator. But if you have to pivot and you do it efficiently, meaning you understand what kind of problem you have and what kind of mistakes you were making, readjust, recommunicate, reset, and actually build in different directions and are efficient. And you can win, you can create, you can have some success. I think it's a good indicator of a team that works really well together, and usually it's a good product culture and general culture.
Very interesting. I have a question around that, right? We've all heard about sprint retros, right? We look back at the sprint and we say, hey, what went wrong, what went well, what did I like, what do we want to change?
Yeah.
Right? Do you guys believe that we should just do it for a product feature, or
yes,
believe like, hey, this last quarter, right, review at a broader level?
Should do it at company level.
Yeah, exactly, company level. Let's say, like, hey, we believe our hypothesis was this, right?
Yeah.
What did we learn as teams, right? Do you think that?
I think you can apply this to everything in life, maybe even your family.
I agree. So I mean, I've seen that work very well. We have done that as well, and definitely think that's critical, right? So again, the time period between which you do them will vary depending on the level, right? So for actual development teams or product engineering design, yeah, definitely every sprint, however long your sprint cycles are. Even for those teams, definitely quarterly, just review your goals. But as a function, definitely quarterly. As a company, maybe quarterly, maybe half yearly, definitely annually. You should ideally be having quicker feedback loops, but yes, that has to happen. And yes, particularly for product features and releases too. Go back and revisit. Okay, cool. Maybe our hypothesis was right, but our execution was wrong. And just to come back to the point you made around go-to-market, I think that's a fantastic observation, right? Because at the end of the day, if you just ship something and none of the other functions have come together and your marketing is not in place, your legal stuff is not in place, etc., it's kind of pointless at the end of the day. So that's actually a great indicator for, is everything working as harmoniously as possible. So thanks for that. I'm going to steal it.
Yeah, okay. So any other questions or?
No.
Any reason why the question was asked?
It's more trying to understand, how the other parts of the organization think about this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think just one comment, right? As I said before, it's very easy to talk about. It's not easy to actually implement it. What I've learned throughout my years, right, that I know all these things inside my head, but actually practically they're not easy to do because you're facing, human being and human psychologies and people that are at different stage in their career, and they have personal agenda, or there's personal relationship that are good or bad, and there's politics and business and environments, and it's a very difficult thing. But I think if I can speak to people who are maybe moving into product management who are thinking about this, I think this is one of the key tool, I would say, as a product manager, especially as you grow into senior role, you can use to try to move towards this ideal scenario. They would probably have described an ideal things, and I'm not sure. Maybe Naveen works in a perfect product manager. It's always a quest, right? And so I want to make sure people don't think it's like, oh yeah, this is it should be like this the norm. It's not the norm, but knowing where you're going, I think it will help you to make some decisions. But don't expect to go into a company to find everything absolutely peachy, because I think it's going to be a bit difficult.
Yeah, interesting you said, like, just now right before the podcast, we're talking about why, like, if there was a product management course, I would have taken it, but there still isn't. And I think what my colleague was saying is that they haven't figured out a right way to teach product yet. Because there's no right way.
Yeah, because even the definition of product management changes company to company. Right? Going back to Max's point, right? I think that's where I see this has two overlapping stuff. One from a company culture point, support, which by in turn says that hey, at a leadership level, there's a strong buy-in for this, right? And they see the value of operating in this space, right? And that will not happen in day one, right? And that's where product managers and product folks has a lot of role to play in, right? Putting these common principles and solving this at a very microcosm level and showing that how it's like adding value to the overall team.
And also, I think another point very interesting, right? Sometimes the people in the company that are most difficult or they're struggling the most are the one at the top of the organization, usually kind of the founders and the CEO, and because they tend to see things in a certain way, I mean, which is normal because of them. And so I think it's kind of one of the skills is really trying to influence, right, and help people, especially above, to understand why this is important. Because Naveen is right. I mean, if they don't understand why this is important, it's going to be very difficult to do it across the company, right? And so you need to have the support from the top that understand why this is important as a process, right? Why we're doing certain things, because I think it's a bit counterintuitive, right? In human kind of psychology, tend to think, oh, this is the problem. I see it, I solve it, I know the solutions. Why don't we do it? Let's do it. Do it now, right? And that's how people think, right? And in reality, that's most of the time that decision is wrong, right? And the product culture and what product management does is really creating a system around making the right decisions, right? But the top of the organization needs to understand that, right? That actually is actually helpful. This process is actually helpful to make the right decisions that are ultimately benefiting the company and the business, basically. Yeah.
I'll just add one point or one last comment. This is advice that was given to me a few years ago by one of my colleagues / managers at the time. He would always send me articles on the best practices of product management, right? Like a lot of them written by the Silicon Valley Product Group and a few other authors out there. And then yet separately, when we'd have product reviews and things, I would get feedback or criticism like, hey, you're not being practical enough, you're not being pragmatic enough. And then one day I was like, dude, like, you keep sending me these things about the ideal state, but then you want me to just like build a simple button or feature, like, what's going on? They don't add up. And then he was like, so I'm sending you those things so that you keep in mind this ideal end state and always work towards that, but realize that that is basically a nirvana or almost a hypothetical dream state. But I grill you like this so that you always come back to the ground reality of your product, your customers, your business. Build towards this, work towards this. You have to keep that in mind so that you can convince our CEO and our leaders and so on. But in reality, if you deliver these results, then they will buy in and listen to you to say, okay, cool, this guy knows how to get something done. Maybe we'll listen to him and work towards this state. But if you just keep talking about that but don't deliver the ground results, a CEO will not care. So like Please read all the tweet threads, read all the LinkedIn thought posts and so on.
But don't do it.
But deliver.
All the gurus.
Yeah, exactly.
All the
Right.
gurus.
So anyway, as product managers or people, you have to keep a lot of things in mind. But this is something that's crucial, I think, for a lot of people.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, guys, for sharing. I think that's about time. We have that's all we have today. And thank you for tuning in. Our podcast when it's published, and stay tuned for the next one. Bye.
Bye.